Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Mahmoud Al-Qudsi from Neosmart Technologies, and this is my first time hosting a code streaming session. I originally wanted to live stream myself working on a web app developed in ASP.NET Core 2.0 that allowed for self-hosted text, files, and images, kind of like a self-hosted imager or paste bin, but with support for more file types and not relying on third-party services that, where you're the product and that they might disappear at any time. However, to start things off small and simple for my first code streaming session, today I'm just going to be working on a new utility that I've sorely needed for some time, but never got around to writing. Most Neosmart projects start off like this, and I find it to be a good approach in general to writing useful applications and utilities. Identify a pain point, maybe something you hate doing, or something that's very repetitive and takes a long time, a lot longer than it should, and just go from there. I do a lot of bug reporting, blogging, and software documentation as part of my work here at Neosmart Technologies. These jobs don't have too much in common, but one thing they all share is that they highly rely on screenshots. That if you're filing a bug report, you want a screenshot of the behavior that you're trying to explain. You're writing software documentation, a screenshot of the application, the page that you're trying to describe, or whatnot. Blogging, same thing. So taking screenshots is easy, but processing them thereafter is kind of a real pain. All you have to do is just, print screen or outprint screen to capture the screen or the window in question. And then the issue becomes trying to export that bitmap from your clipboard to a file or to a stream that you can share online. And most of the applications that try to simplify this end up making it harder. For me, it's actually faster to just print screen and then Windows key R, type in MS Paint, possibly resize, Control V to paste, and maybe resize the buffer to fit, and then save the image. Then it is for me to launch the Windows snipping tool or some other screenshot utility and use that to take a screenshot. Other attempts like Dropbox and other applications that run in the background and just save everything that you copy to the clipboard to a file on the disk. I'm not a fan of those. It's a waste of space and, more importantly, privacy risk. You don't necessarily want everything that you've copied to the clipboard immediately dumped to a file on your drive, and especially not shared or synced online. So, let's try to find a solution that's a lot more straightforward and to the point. It's going to be explicit. It only writes to a file when you want it to, but it should also be flexible and simple enough to use so that you can export files in whatever format you need and be able to go from clipboard to file on disk in as little time and keystrokes as possible. At Neosmart Technologies, we're huge fans of WSL, which is the new Linux subsystem for Windows 10 that brings a full-blown Ubuntu installation to your Windows, integrated right into the command line. As you can see, of course, I've already got a fish shell going here. And I spend more time in here than I do on the rest of the Windows desktop, Visual Studio and Chrome excluded. So for today, we're going to be writing a command line application that takes an image from the clipboard and saves it to a path of your choice. I haven't planned out how the code is going to look yet. After almost 15 years of programming, my thought process resembles code so much that I find it faster and easier to just write code from the very start. The only catch is that you have to be willing to treat your code as ephemeral. It's just as if you're taking notes on paper, except it's on, in your editor. You have to be willing to throw away that code as soon as you find a better approach, just like you would if you were writing something on paper and then scratch it out and start all over again with a different design or from a different perspective, because there's no point in, becoming attached to code that is subpar or inferior, especially if you have a better idea or solution at your hands. Normally, I've been choosing Rust for most of my command line development because of the incredible safety benefits it brings. And it's inherently cross-platform and with an amazing package ecosystem from crates.io and the Cargo package manager. But in this case, since we're dealing with highly platform-dependent code, by design, by nature, you're interfacing with the system clipboard, and that code is going to look very different if you're writing for Windows than if you are for Mac, than if you are for Linux or for BSD. So the cross-platform benefits go out the window, And the Windows API for dealing with clipboards is very hairy and nasty from the Win32 API. So I really am not looking forward to marshaling all of those data types and the BMP headers between C and Rust. So actually, we're just going to go with a good old-fashioned .NET Framework console application. We can't use .NET Core for the same reasons that we can't use Rust. It simply doesn't expose the APIs needed to interact with the system clipboard because of their highly platform-dependent nature. So we're just going to go with a old-fashioned .NET 4.6 framework project, but we'll still be sticking to modern coding practices such as embracing async and await from the very start. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get started. So we'll just going to create a new solution and just trash the old one. Okay. I had just created the new solution previously before I decided to stream this session, so let's go. Console application, image paste. Well, let's just go with lowercase here. And we're going to put it in our Git repository. Okay. And the first thing we're going to need to do is enable C# 7.1 language features to be able to use async and await in our main. So that's right here under the build settings, advanced, and here instead of C# latest version, which would be 7.0, we're going to go with 7.2, and that'll let us use this signature here. And as you can see, this will actually compile. But let's return an integer, like any good command line utility should, and we'll just go there. Now this is our main. Okay. So the assumption is that the user is launching this command line application. Let's image paste, and they'll be providing a path to save the image to. So obviously, the first thing you want to do is check the arguments that are being passed in. In C#, the arguments come in the args parameter, and unlike in C++, I believe args of 0 is not the application name, and that's going to be the first command. We can double check that quickly. Just put a breakpoint here, F5 to run, and args is empty. So yeah. Now if args length is equal to, or better yet, it's not equal to 1. Console.error.sync. And just throw a message, error, and return -1 in this case. Now that's the main structure of our program. We'll revisit all this with proper command line parsing at some other time, but right now let's just create our class. It's easy when you're writing command line tools. It's easy to fall into the habit of just putting everything in your main. It's ridiculously simple to fall for declarative programming instead of object oriented. But we're going to resist that urge and just create a new class. Let's call it image paste. Okay. And so this is going to be the main interface into our code here. And the first thing that we need to do is obviously capture the image from the clipboard. So let's create that as well. Capture, and there we're going to use the clipboard. So the clipboard is contained in the system.windows.forms namespace actually, and so we're going to have to add a reference to that. So system.windows.forms. So here we go, we add this, and now we have access to the clipboard, which is using system.windows.forms. And what we want to do is we want to check and make sure that the clipboard contains a image, because the clipboard can contain text, obviously. If I just copy and paste this, it would be an error to try and call image paste with that on the clipboard. So what we have to do is check what the clipboard does. So .NET exposes a lot of really useful and easy to use APIs for this. So here we are, we're just going to do contains image. So if not clipboard that contains image, what are we going to do? We have to throw an exception here. We could just, so I like to create a new file and call it exceptions.cs, which contains all of my exceptions. I don't like to create a separate file for each exception. I think it's, especially because they're usually no-op exceptions. They just derive from system.exception and they don't do anything else. So it's really stupid to have that many separate files for that. So anyway, namespace, image paste, class, invalid clipboard data exception. And like we said, we'll subclass from exception. And what I do is I usually create a constructor that takes an optional message and an optional inner exception. And what we'll do here is we'll go to base and message inner exception. And then I create a overload for the default. And I put in a default message text. So the clipboard does not contain valid image / bitmap valid bitmap data, and not base, but this. And that's our exception class. So we can come back here now and throw new invalid clipboard data exception. No need for a custom message here because we've already defined it here. Okay, and that's the start of our capture. So we can come back here so you don't forget. So what we're going to do is we're going to imgpaste is equal to new image paste, and we will call the capture routine. And we'll stick all this in a try catch block. And here we're going to catch our first exception, invalid clipboard data exception. And we're just going to write that message that we just got to the console. So write line async ex.message. And we're going to return -2. Okay. Now back here. So now we have the clipboard does contain an image. So what are we going to do? We're going to try to get that image out. So clipboard.getData. Well, we have a get image right here that actually returns a system.image. Only we need to include a reference to system.drawing. So all of these classes have been deprecated in ASP.NET, or sorry, in .NET Core. The system.windows.forms, SWF, which was the interface creation, and system.drawing, which is basically a wrapper around the GDI library. All of that is gone in .NET Core. So, but here we can use it safely. So now this is our images right here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to export it right to the destination. So this is going to, let's save the image here. So we said this is a system.drawing image. So image underscore image is equal to null and then let's go here like this. And we're going to add another interface, and we're going to call it save or save as, and string path. And here what we'll do is underscore image if underscore image does not equal to null, or let's reverse that check, if image underscore image is equal to null, invalid operation exception, underscore image has not been initialized. Or we can give a more user-friendly error here. No image has been captured. Use the capture method before calling save as. Okay. And now we can go image.save, and this takes a file name, which we will pass into this function, so we can just go image.savePath, and this returns void, so if any errors happen, they'll probably be thrown as an exception, which is fine by us. Now, over here, we said that the args of 0 is going to be the path, screenshot.png, so we're just going to come here and go imgpaste.save as and insert args of 0, and that appears to be it. I mean, I've not used the system that drawing that image APIs in a while. I can't remember if it automatically converts the file to the desired format. Obviously, the original data on the clipboard is a bitmap, a BMP file, or a BMP stream in memory. So I don't know if that's what gets saved to the disk, or if we end up with, if we pass in .png as our extension, if that's what happens. So, the reason why we're using an IDE, because debugging is nice and easy. So let's build the solution. Yeah, that's just my Visual Studio throwing errors. All right. So let's copy something to the clipboard. I'm going to just take a screenshot of the editor right now. So Alt print screen. And let's go to my terminal window here. I'm using an extension to just load a terminal window. It preloads my fish shell in WSL. But so here we are. We're going to go to the image paste directory and bin/debug. And if we call imgpaste.exe right now, of course, that's the error that we expected. Usage imgpaste.exe screenshot.png. So let's try it. The clipboard does not contain valid bitmap data. Well, why not? Copy again. Does not contain valid bitmap data. So there's something going on here. Let's debug this. Let's just add a command line argument, screenshot.png, and the working directory is going to be the debugged folder. That's fine. We can just leave it blank for the default. And let's debug it and see what happens. Put a breakpoint here and run. So now clipboard that contains image is false. We can of course launch a paint window, paste. As you can see, we do have an image on the clipboard. So what's going on? Let's find out. What other APIs do we have here? Contains file list, contains data, contains text. It's not very helpful, but run again. Let's see, clipboard. Can we add a watch for clipboard, or is there nothing to be seen from there? Is a type, which is not valid. Makes sense. Let's just try clipboard.getImage right now, and what happens? We get null back. What about clipboard.getData? So what does getData expect as a parameter? String format. So these are the original formats. I think there is an enum that defines the data formats here, but I'm not sure. Apparently not. So let's just find out some. Here we go. Okay. Clipboard image formats, Win32. And here we are. This is what I'm expecting, a CF bitmap, but also a CF DIB. But we need to see what's the format on there now. Clipboard dot. There's no get data type. I mean, contains data should be true. Does this also require a format? Okay, CF underscore bitmap is false. But let's just make sure that we're using the right API here. So clipboard dot contains data. Data formats. Okay, so there is a an enum of sorts, and it's the system.windows.forms.dataFormats class. So let's try this. DataFormats.bitmap. And again, that's false, which is understandable because the contains image is probably just an alias for contains data with data formats dot bitmap. But let's try using DIB. Also false. How do we get the current clipboard data format? Well, I don't see a way to get the clipboard format here. So unfortunately, and this is the problem with using a high-level API, leaky abstractions. So right now, you know, the clever developers at .NET and Microsoft, they gave us these APIs to get images off the clipboard. Well, right now we think we have an image on the clipboard, and yet we can't get it. So what are we going to do? The answer is always you have to go a level down. So we're just going to create a new Windows console application, and we're going to call it pvdebug, or, you know, for pasteboard debugger. And just create it here. This is just a temporary application. I do this all the time. Like I said, don't get too attached to your code. Be willing to throw it away. So here's our app, and we're not going to bother customizing anything. This is just, like I said, a throwaway project. But all we're going to do is use the actual Win32 Clipboard API. And here, clipboard formats, using the clipboard. So I just want to see the name of the function. I think it's pasting information from the clipboard. GetClipboardData. And in a specified format. Well, we don't have the formats. We need to get the clipboard, enum clipboard formats. What does that give us? Enumerates the data formats currently available on the clipboard. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. And how does this API work? It returns you make a series of calls to enum clipboard formats. For each call, the format parameter specifies an available clipboard format, and the function returns the next available clipboard format. So I guess it just goes, you know, it's like a for loop for I is greater than the value passed in, where format is going to be provided. So you start off with format equals 0, and that's the first one, and then it just loops around that. So let's try this. What's the header file here? This is in winuser.h, include windows.h. So I should include windows.h. Right, this is C++, not var, auto. FMT, when does it return on failure? When it's done, when the function fails, the return value is 0. If the clipboard is not open, the function fails. So obviously we have to open the clipboard first. So I actually already wrote code before that uses the clipboard, and it was a command line application called paste, which I used to interact with the Windows clipboard from WSL. Windows provides a clip.exe which copies data to the clipboard, but it provides no counterpart for copying out of the clipboard, and so that's what paste.cpp here is. And our code here was very simple: open clipboard, and then if not clipboard contains format, we passed in text at the time because that's what we wanted. So let's open the clipboard. If not, open clipboard. And yeah, I believe we can just pass in null ptr here. std, let's should include IO stream using namespace std. Unable to open system clipboard. And let's write out the error. We're not expecting an issue there. And of course, if you open the clipboard, then you need to close the clipboard. So copy and paste this message. Yeah. Let's just refactoring code takes 10 seconds and it makes your life, it'll pay off repeatedly. So let's here and underscore error. And let's just, this is just temporary, so whatever, exit process -1. Underscore error. Could not close system clipboard. Again, not expecting any issues there, but why not make it look good? Now what we need to do is get clipboard data. So we're going to start with 0, like we said. And the clipboard format, is it just an integer, or does it have a enum? Well, it just takes an integer. So let's do this. Integer I is equal to 0. It's always easier to just start with a while loop, and you can always change it into a for loop later if you want. So just start with a while true. And now you have integer format is equal to 0. Get clipboard data, and we're going to pass in format, and this is going to be format is equal to. Now, right, not C#. This returns a handle. No, not get clipboard data. We wanted clipboard. What was it called? The function that we needed was clipboard contains format, clipboard formats. My memory is failing me. What were we? Why is my mind? Isn't it like clipboard contains? Get clipboard format name, get clipboard owner, get clipboard window, get priority formats, get updated, register. Ah, yes, it was enum clipboard formats. That's the one. And so we put in our start, and format is equal to. So now format is the format that we have right now. And there is a function that I just saw. It's right here. Get clipboard format name. And so this returns a string when you pass in a format. So like most C functions, we have to pass in a buffer. Okay. This obviously tcar name and whatever, just max path. Here we will get clipboard format. The format is 0. The format name is going to be name, and the max count. Every API is different. Some of them require the size in bytes, and some of them require the size in number of characters. So we have to always make sure we're using the right parameter. Now count the maximum length in characters of the string to be. So if you use size of, you would be wrong. You have to use the underscore count of macro name. And of course we have to validate here. So if format is equal to 0, break. No more formats. Now get clipboard format. What does it return? The function succeeds, the return value is the length. If the function fails, the return value is 0, indicating the requested format does not exist or is predefined. So if is equal to 0, underscore error, clipboard format not found. And now the name array contains the name of the format that we want, so we can just write that to the command line. And I know I'm mixing wide characters and regular characters. Like I said, just a temporary app, so it doesn't really matter. Let's do this, std cout. Or let's move this here. std cout and wc out l name. And this will dump the clipboard formats to the output. So let's build this project. And again, okay, we can ignore those errors. Here we have to change directories, cd space pbdebug. Actually, C++ projects output to the solution directory. So here we go, pbdebug /pbdebug.exe. Clipboard format not found. Okay, I don't even remember what was on the clipboard, but clipboard format, let's requested format and okay. Let's try again. Build. These are not building. This is a bug in Visual Studio. All right. Now we can come back here and requested format 13 not found. Like I said, I don't know what was on the clipboard, so let's take a screenshot and then try this. So the requested format was 2. 2 was not found. Why are we getting this error? GetClipboard format. Indicating that the requested format does not exist or is predefined. When I saw this a few minutes ago, I thought this might actually be a possibility. Apparently, the predefined formats are not accessible through that API. So let's just look at the header file. So just write something, jump to the header in question. Here we go. CF text is 1, CF bitmap is 2. So let's, unfortunately, we're going to have to do this. And that should take care of that problem. Let's come here and see. 2, 8, and 17. Again, took a screenshot, debug 2, 8, and 17. What's 2, 8, and 17? So CF underscore bitmap, jump, oops. I think I hit the wrong key, F12, okay. 2 is CF bitmap, 8 is CF DIB, and 17 is DIB v5. So DIB is also a bitmap format, actually. It's for a device-independent bitmap. So what we're seeing here is that the clipboard actually does contain valid bitmap data, but in .NET, we are getting an error, which F5, we can see it again. Clipboard.contains_image is returning false, even though clipboard.contains_image should return true in this case. Like I said, SWF, it's been deprecated. We can look up this error. Clipboard.contains_image returns false. And that is taking a long time. This is checking if a file is an image, which isn't our issue. Our issue is that it actually the contains image is not providing what we need here. So, well, we do know that it contains the right format. So apparently we can't use contains image. So clipboard.contains_image is always returning false. We've verified clipboard contains CF_bitmap, CF_DIB, and CF_DIB v5. Bug. And now we're going to have to do something else here. So We'll use our own definition for clipboard contains image. So we'll just add private bool clipboard image. And this is going to return clipboard that contains okay, there isn't even an API to check if it contains a certain format, so we're just going to get data and let's look at the documentation for clipboard.getData and see what happens if it does not contain an image, or if it does not contain the format required. Usually contains data. Oh, okay. Right, it does. Data formats dot bitmap return or clipboard that contains data formats dot dib or clipboard that contains data. I don't know if the dibv5 is available in this library in the first place. It is a new feature. We can see which version it was for here. F12, as you can see, it's Windows version is greater than 5.0, so that's not really that modern. This would be supported on Windows XP, I believe, so. But in all cases, let's just stick to these for right now. So let's replace this with, if not, clipboard contains image, and put a breakpoint in C. Clipboard contains image is also returning false here. What is going on? What other data formats are there? Bitmap. None of these are images. So is there a custom constructor for this that we can use to create our own var t should be new data formats? Nope, not allowed. So data formats dot get format, and there we go, the integer ID. So like we said, 2 was cf_bitmap. So let's try this, cf_bitmap, and return clipboard that contains data cf_bitmap. This is the format. Let's try .name. Okay, let's see what happens now. And again, it's returning false. Let's step into the clipboard contains image function. CF bitmap. There you go. ID2, name is bitmap. So clipboard that contains data bitmap, and this is returning false. Even though we have, or let's make sure we have a screenshot. Outprint screen. Try again. F10. And again, .NET is refusing to see that our clipboard contains an image. Huh. And yet, using our terminal window, /pbdebug, predefined to 817. They are all on the clipboard. So at this point, we've definitely hit a brick wall with this API. And like I said, this is the problem with using high-level constructs. I feel like there has to be a very obvious solution here, but clipboard.contains data returns false. And a query for the data format Bitmap will return true if the data can automatically be converted to the specified data format. Well, for other data formats, this method returns true only if the specified format is available natively on the clipboard. But we do know that it actually contains an image. So this is a bit of a problem. There we go. Inappropriately returning false. Microsoft sites are always slow. We can try looking this up in the cache. What is with the internet today? Okay. Yep. Okay, there we go. This bug is from 2010. It returns false. Okay, what are the details? Get data object.contains instead of clipboard.contains data, and this works fine. The WPF team has reviewed this and will not be addressing this issue anytime, as the team is focused on the bugs impacting the highest number of WPF developers. Basically, no issue and nobody cares. Let's try the workaround mentioned in that article. They said, tried clipboard.getData. Was it data or get data object? The workaround was clipboard.getData object, which retrieves the data as a data object. Dot. Does it get formats? There's no contains. Okay. Let's see what we get if we call clipboard.getData object at that point. Let's return this to the way it was. Okay, F5. And here, copy some to the clipboard just to make sure. Locals and, okay, watch, sorry. Here, clipboard get data object, clipboard get data object is returning null. Even though that makes no sense. CD space imgpaste debug pb debug .exe. It definitely contains data, but clipboard contains image is returning false, and clipboard.getData object is returning null every time, which makes no sense because getData object null if there is no data on the clipboard, which we know is a lie. My guess here is that we're running into some sort of sandboxing. Perhaps is Visual Studio running as an administrator, and so it's a different clipboard, no, it's not, because here from the command line we're just using, well, we haven't tried that from the command line, have we? Let's see. Image paste bin debug image paste test.png. The clipboard does not contain valid bitmap data. Print screen, try again. Yeah, so it is not an issue with the user. Okay, this is kind of a problem. All right, I guess we have a problem. It seems we can't use the SWF clipboard interface at all because it's refusing to recognize the contents of the system clipboard that are available to other applications. And we thought it was a sandboxing issue, perhaps elevated process versus normal process, but that does not seem to be the case. So at this point, we're going to be forced to use the C API instead. Depending on how much we have to do in C, we might have to switch the entire project to C or C++, or maybe we can just use PInvoke to get the data from the clipboard. But, okay. So from C++, when you use GetClipboardData, or this will give you a handle to the data. When there's a bitmap on there, I believe you will get a hbitmap back. Okay. It seems there's a real dearth of documentation here, but the logical presumption, copying information to the clipboard. Let's just search for cf_bitmap here. Okay, here we go. This is an example of a clipboard viewer. So in case of CF bitmap, they create a data context or device context, and if it's not equal to null, open clipboard, get clipboard data, select the object, get client rectangle, bit and then they write the HBMP to there. Okay. So the point is that GetClipboardData returns an HBitmap. I'm surprised at the lack of documentation here. You'd think it's a very popular API, but let's see if we can convert an HBitmap to a a system.drawing.image object. So HBitmap to image C# image dot from HBitmap. All right, so apparently we stand a chance. Let's try this, otherwise we might have to switch languages for the project. So let's, we're going to use PInvoke to open the clipboard and get clipboard data as cf_bitmap. We're also going to have to use PInvoke to query the, as an alternative for the clipboard contains image function. So unfortunately, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Win32 static, and we'll use this as our PInvoke class. So here we are. Let's search for the first one that we had was Clipboard Format. Just copy and paste the declaration. This is not the... Oh, there we go. Okay, and we're going to need to create a rever function for this, so here we can create a public enum clipboard formats, and we have our header here. Let's copy these over to here. Text should equal to 1, bitmap should equal to 2, meta file should equal to 3, link should equal to 4, diff should equal to 5. Here, let's just do this. And why not? Here we go. All right, so now this is our enum clipboard formats entry point. We need, which we'll use in conjunction with the clipboard formats enum here that we made out of the contents of the header file. Now we need the GetClipboardData function. So let's search here, GetClipboardData. Okay. And this returns an int ptr, which is just a pointer, which is what a handle is at the end of the day. And that's a bitmap. So this is GetClipboardData. Now we can't use GetClipboardData until we've opened the clipboard, and so we'll need a entry point for open clipboard, and also one for close clipboard. So this is core DLL, that's not the right one. That's also core DLL. Yes, user32. And there does not seem to be, oh, here we go. All right, just as we were about to write our own. Alrighty. And close clipboard. Here we are. That's the API for close clipboard. All right, so now we have the functions that we need in order to interact with the native functions for the clipboard, bypassing .NET entirely. Much more complicated, and needlessly so, than we thought it would be. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open the clipboard. So here we will call Win32 dot public internal, sorry. Open clipboard, and this is going to be, like we said last time, dot null or 0. And sorry, system exception. Clipboard. Okay, now the clipboard is open. We have to check the types on the clipboard. We're just going to create a helper method here, and we're going to have it return formats. It's going to return a list of Win32.clipboard formats. And this is basically going to be a clone of our code here, this while loop. So we are going to come here and integer format is equal to 0. The list of Win32.clipboard formats should be equal to new list. Okay, now we have while true. Okay, so while the returned format does not equal to 0, okay, so we have type conflict in the definition. Instead of, we're just going to coerce it here from bool to enum clipboard formats. That is a mistake in the declaration. Oh, there is no. Okay, format. Right. Format is equal to, cannot convert from uint to int. That is what we had originally, so. Okay, there we go. Now, while the format does not equal to 0, after calling enum clipboard formats, we are going to add formats, add, cast it as a Win32.clipboard formats format, and return formats. Okay, so now here, our clipboard formats should be equal to GetClipboardData. formats. If clipboard formats that contains CF bitmap new invalid clipboard data exception. All right, let us try again. Breakpoint here. We have to close the clipboard though, obviously. So all right, let's give this a try. F5 and F10. Who knows what was on the clipboard? Let's print screen. F10. There we go. Finally. All right, we have our clipboard data. Whew. All right. So now the only thing that we need, get clipboard data returns an int ptr. All right, so now we're going to go like this. Int ptr hbm bitmap should equal to win32 dot get clipboard data, and the format is going to be as integer win32 dot clipboard formats dot cf bitmap. We can actually avoid this casting here if we use the Marshall as parameter, I believe. So if we come here, if you change this to clipboard formats and Marshall as let's okay, we'll deal with this later. Anyway, so this is a uint. We're just casting for now. Oops, get rid of this as well. All right, so get clipboard data. This is the, and so then now here, var img should equal to system.drawing.image.from hbitmap hbitmap. This should create our image. We're not going to actually use the, let's put it back there, underscore image should equal to image.from hbitmap. And now we can test our code once more. Let's see if this works. Breakpoint F9. Okay, F5. Now we have a bitmap successful, the bitmap handle, and now we have a bitmap. You can see for yourself, it has a height and it has a width. The resolution looks right. We are in business, ladies and gentlemen. All right, it was apparently written to the directory in question. Let's find out. Did it work? Okay, imgpaste bin debug screenshot.png. Look at that. It worked. Now this was written here. We said we wanted to find out what the format was. So let's open a fish prompt here. And we are going to go to the debug directory. Let's use the file utility on screenshot.png. It is a PNG file. if we tried this, let's try this. imgpaste.exe, and we did screenshot.jpg for a JPEG file. They're the same exact size. Suspicious, isn't it? Let's see. Screenshot.files, screenshot.jpg. It is also a PNG file. And so it'll open, obviously, but the file is decidedly not a JPEG. So it's working. We're exporting the data, but if the data is always going out as a PNG, we're going to need to do some sort of format conversion to get it to work the way we originally wanted the software to work. But we've got something here. All right, let's commit our changes. Why is it doing this? That directory certainly does exist, so I don't know what's going on here. That's all right. We'll just do it in a CMD window for now. All right. We will add everything that's changed. We'll add the imgpaste directory. We won't add the pb debug for now. Initial work on paste from clipboard. Okay. I'm going to make this code available on GitHub, so I'll even do it right now, actually. Let's create a new repo. File. All right. So this code is going to be available for anybody that would like to see it. That's our URL. Add origin. Okay. So now we have the initial program working. One thing I wanted to do, every time I'm using PInvoke to marshal or to manage with any sort of handles, it's a good idea to use the dispose format. So there's two different places, two different things, objects that need to be disposed. First is the image, which is using the system.drawing.image and leaks memory like there is no tomorrow if you don't properly dispose it. And the other thing is the clipboard. We open the clipboard and you see over here we throw an exception. So if we open the clipboard and there was only text on it, we will throw an invalid clipboard data exception and the clipboard won't be closed. So what we can do now is actually create a new class, and we're going to call this clipboard. Win32 clipboard to avoid any sort of naming conflicts. And it needs to be an iDisposable. We'll implement the interface, and now it's going to be very simple. In the constructor, we are going to call Win32.openClipboard, and in the destructor, we are going to call Win32.closeClipboard. And anytime that this object resides in memory, the clipboard will be open. So here, let's, with the safety checks, and here, okay. So now this code changes. It becomes using var clipboard is equal to new clipboard, and we can get rid of the open, put that here. Now when the new clipboard exception is thrown, the clipboard will be properly closed. And right, it's not clipboard. Well, you know what? That's fine. Win32 clipboard. All right, and we can actually move the GetClipboardFormats function to the clipboard, making the API a little bit nicer. This way we also guarantee, since this is a member function, non-static member function of the Win32 clipboard class, that the clipboard will always be open, because that happens in the constructor. And so that's the formats on the clipboard. So here we can go clipboard dot get clipboard formats, and now we can rename this get formats, and there you go. We can even move this to the clipboard class, since it's not actually used and it doesn't directly map to the Win32 via PInvoke. So we'll go to the Win32 clipboard. Thank God for C# nested class support and formats. Okay. Replace all. Okay, and in our image paste, clipboard.formats. Oops. Win32 clipboard.formats. All right. And like we said, the second thing is making image paste itself disposable. So here, disposable, and implement interface. Fix the indentation. All right, so this is the dispose method. I like to stick that at the very bottom. And here, if underscore image does not equal to null, underscore image dot dispose. Now, this can actually be replaced with, to use the more modern syntax, like we said, question mark dot dispose. This is the null operator. If image is null, it'll skip it and it won't call dispose. This entire function will just evaluate to null instead. And underscore image is equal to null, and we can just get rid of this. And there you have it. That's our dispose method. So now we have the clipboard, and we have that. All right. We can remove the reference to system.windows.forms, since we're no longer using the clipboard class, and build again to make sure. Okay. And we can actually rename this to clipboard if we wanted to. But instead of doing that, we're just going to, using static, clipboard is equal to, or is it using clipboard is equal to There we go. Now we can just like that. And we can move even this to here. And of course, it would be incorrect to call this formats. It should be singular. So there you go. And here, we'll paste this. Return Win32 that GetClipboard. And here, format. As T. Well, no generic for now. We'll figure that out later. And here we can do clipboard, get data, clipboard.format, CF bitmap. And again, there's no need for the explicit data type here. There we go. And this code has now been cleaned up. We can build it, make sure everything's good. We can take a screenshot and run the code to make sure it still works. And there we go. It's still working. Let's save our changes, or commit our changes. Oh, right. Let's exit this. Okay. So now what remains is the image format issue. Like we said, as we saw, it's always creating a PNG. We can either use the system that drawing namespace and the functionality that exposes to try and do the conversion ourselves, or we can use a, let's see if there's an overload for this that specifies the format. There we go. System.drawing.imaging.image format. And this image imaging. And there you have it. Support for BMP, JPEG, and PNG formats. So what we'll do here is create a helper method. Let's call it private image format, or sorry, image format. Select format, and this is going to take file name. And we'll use the system.path API to extract the extension from the file. So var ext is equal to system.io.path, or let's just use path dot get extension for file name. And of course, as always, we need to make sure that we understand the APIs that we're using. So what happens if somebody passes in a file name without an extension here, as some Unix users or accustomed to Unix users might do? What happens? Is that where you get argument exception, or does it return null? Does it return nothing? Two ways of finding out, of course. You can try it out for yourself, or you can just look it up in the API documentation. So let's find out. Path.getExtension. If path is null, getExtension returns null. If path does not have extension information, getExtension returns string.empty. So that's where my favorite null-related API function comes in. If string.is null or white space ext, return whatever image format we're going to use as a default. I like PNG. Okay, now we're going to create a map of extensions. You can do this two ways. You can either go, if extension is equal to PNG, blah, blah, blah. But I prefer something closer to a more functional approach. So we're going to create a dictionary, and this is also more extensible in the future, or more easily extensible, I should say. A dictionary of string to image format. This is going to be static for memory serving purposes. And format dictionary is equal to new. Now, we can actually use so if somebody passes in .png all lowercase versus if somebody passes in .png all uppercase or mixed case, you'd have to accommodate for that. Obviously, we can use extension .tolower and look it up in the dictionary, but we can also actually use the string equality comparer .invariant culture ignore case. And what this does is lookups in the dictionary will be case insensitive in the first place, and that just makes our code here a little cleaner and more idiomatic. So we can come here and go if format dictionary dot try get value ext out image format var format return format, else return image format .png. And now good practices, since this is a default value, we can just come here or just const image format default format is equal to image format .png, and it must be a constant. C# has very little tolerance for, or is very strict with what it accepts as constant. So instead we just make this static read only, and make this read only as well. It gives the compiler room to apply optimizations where the data is stored and when it's initialized. Whether or not it does in practice, a big question mark. The C# compiler is not very aggressive, especially for anybody coming from a C++ background. But anyway, like I said, just more idiomatic, best practices, whatnot. Return default format, and here return default format. Now you might be tempted to just skip this altogether since we have a fallback here. But what happens if try get value gets past a null? Is null a legal value for the dictionary? Obviously some people have this stuff memorized. For me, it's I write in so many different languages and I use so many different frameworks, it's impossible to memorize all this. And so I just try to employ common sense here. So we have and in general, it's a very good approach to use null safety checks up there. What we can do instead is we can do this. If not string is empty, and it's up to you which one you think is cleaner. But for now, I mean, like, it's fine. It doesn't matter really. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It just goes down to personal taste. I really don't care. And so there we have our format selection code. And now we can come here. img format should equal to select format from the file name, which we can just pass in the path because it'll automatically strip the directories and everything since we're using the path API. And that will allow us to now pass in the img format parameter. Save our build. Okay, let's give it a try. Let's try this. Okay, take a screenshot, test.png, and let's try test.jpg. File test.png is PNG data. File test.jpg is also PNG data. Alrighty, what's going on? Let's come here, properties, and go to debug. Let's change the extension here to .jpg, and let's go back, put a breakpoint here, and run. Okay. Now the path is screenshot.jpg, and the image format selected was PNG. All right, so let's see how that happened. F11, path.getExtension for file name is .jpg. You see, there's a dot there. Versus our dictionary, which, by the way, we didn't populate. I just realized. If we had populated it, I would have done it wrong. So in all cases, now we have to populate the dictionary. My apologies, everybody. So the static initializer looks like this: png image format dot png jpg image format dot jpeg, and some people prefer the .jpeg format. So JPEG. If anyone's crazy enough to export as GIF, image format .gif, BMP image format .bitmap. Okay. I'd like to keep my trailing commas if there's a possibility of expanding the list in the future. It makes it easier to more version control friendly. Only one line. If I were to add another line right here, whatever, this line alone will show up as added in get, versus without this, if I didn't have it there before, I'd have to come in and add the comma, and both of these lines would show up as modified. And another, when you're working with lists, be nice. Somebody's going to come along as your code. Try to keep it alphabetical. That was probably a suboptimal sort. If I was in Vim, I could have just selected and :sort enter. But anyway, I have VS Vim disabled. All right, so this is our dictionary. Let's give it a try again. Except, of course, remember the extension, when we called .getExtension, it came back with a period. So we need to add a leading period here. That's alt and drag to get that. All right, let's give this a try. F5. Invalid clipboard data exception. Yes, because there was not an image on the clipboard. Copy. All right, now select format. F10. Format is JPEG. And for the path, screenshot.jpg. So save. Return 0. F5. All right. Let's go back to our command line. We can try this out again. Test.png, and again, test.jpg. File test.png is PNG data. File test.jpg is JPEG data. And now we can actually find out what the deal is with our file sizes. Test.png, 1.3 megabytes, test.jpg, 526K. It's really not the point of this right now, but the system.data or system.drawing class, GDI in general, horrible at compression. The results are far larger than they need to be. But for example, let's just do this. opti.png -07./test.png, and it's just a image optimizer. There's a lot of different ones. People will swear by others. opti.png, I settled on this one many years ago, more than 5 years ago, and there were a few bugs back then. They've been sorted out. It's tried and tested, at least as far as I'm concerned. So, and each one has its own syntax. Some of them write to standard output. Some of them rewrite the file in question. Some of them require a separate output file. My advice: just pick one and stick to it. So I'm using opti.png here to find out just how small we can get this image. But like I said, that's really not the point of the exercise. While this runs, let's save our changes. Always review the changes beforehand. Just skim right through it. We have our dictionary. You can also catch bugs in your code like this if you realize that you added something somewhere, you didn't add it somewhere else. For example, if we hadn't added the types like we did the first time, probably would have caught it on getDiff. Who knows? Anyway, so add -u adds all changed files. Make sure we didn't add any files that were that we need to add as well. All right, we can commit. Detect correct encoding format for output images. Use the extension to decide which codec should be used. All right, and now, right. So we have a 12.7% decrease in the file size, and that is the file that we wanted. Okay. Further optimizations. We could, really the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do. If we import system.drawing has functions for image resizing. We could use those. We could use a third-party library to add functionality here where we can resize the images, specify the width or the height or whatnot before exporting. I personally try to avoid reinventing the wheel where possible. In this case, I would, and this is why I am looking for a command line utility in the first place. A lot of my work, I use convert, which is the ImageMagick command line interface. I use that. I used to use GraphicsMagick, but I've switched back to ImageMagick. GraphicsMagick has a bunch of bugs. It's also less actively maintained in my experience. Anyway, so so what I would do, this is going to be my pipeline. This is why I created this tool. I'll include it in my path so that I can just type in imgpaste. But for now, imgpaste.exe and out.png. And then I'll go convert out.png -resize 512 by 512 to cap the maximum dimension. It preserves aspect ratio to out_/512.png. And now we have a 512 width because our screen is wider than it is tall. Width constrained image out-512.png. We have the original out.png. This is useful. You're working on web development. You can create all the different things. This is a fish prompt. I could do fancy things like for size in, and I can come here and go 128. 512, 960, typical max window height, to 1200, convert out.png -resize, $width, it's, I believe, $width, and we're going to save that to out-$width.png and oops, this is not there's no width. I do this a lot. Width in missing an image file name. Apparently, my syntax was not correct. We can just try this. And that didn't work. Oh, I misspelled. That's the problem. I misspelled width. Okay. There you go. All these different sizes generated from one command. We used the command line to paste the image in the first place, and we worked on it from there. We saved our changes. So some niceties, we can go back to our program.cs. For example, what if we wanted to just generate multiple formats on save? So let's change the format to imgpaste.exe, and then file2.jpg and whatnot. And we can come here and say if args.length is equal to 0. And then we can come here and for destination in args. Oops, again, different languages. This is Rust syntax. dest. Build. Now we can. Is there actually any error? There is not. Okay. Back here, let's try it out. imgpaste out.jpg ls, and in the last right here, the timestamp is identical for both. We have a JPEG and an image. Just like that, we've added support for multiple output formats. Let's add minus. I don't know why this is happening. Okay, add -u status. Okay. Okay, so now we've added support for that. Anytime somebody's using a command line tool, they like the -- version or -- version and -- help command line arguments. We could use a command line parsing library. For example, for something this simple, you really don't need, but why not? Browse. The only consideration, sometimes I like to make a single binary release. So right now we're going from a single file. If we include a library, we're going to have 2 files we need to distribute. You weigh your options. For something like this, let's just take a look at what the code would look like if we didn't want to include any dependencies. Okay, so we're not going to spend too much time trying to make perfect command line parsing, because that's really not the point of this exercise. There are better libraries out there for that, and it's not something worth concerning ourselves with. For example, we're not going to bother with a user trying to enter a file name that starts with a dash, because then we have to figure out if they meant a literal dash or an argument, or did they mean, or we have to provide a mechanism for them to escape that as well. So we're just going to add some really, really basic infrastructure here for parsing arguments. Let's just start with a function, and it'll return a list of strings, which are the paths that are extracted from the command line, and we're going to call it parse arguments, and it's going to take a I read-only list string args. We'll just pass in the same args array that we received from main. And we'll loop over the arguments passed into the program. Anything that starts with a literal dash is going to be treated as an argument, and we'll support both short and long strings using some of the de facto standards. We'll start with if arg invariant is equal to minus minus help, or arg is equal to a literal minus h, case sensitive. Command line programs in general, the standard is case sensitive short parameters, case insensitive long parameters, basically to increase the address space for single character options. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. So here we want to output the same usage text that we originally had here to the command line. I like to follow the convention that if the user explicitly requested the help text, it will be set to standard output. And if the help text was thrown as part of an error, for example, if they misused the command line interface, it'll be returned to standard error. So let's just define here constant string usage text should equal to, and let's go ahead and change this now from screenshot.png to file1.png, and therefore, the parallelism between file1 and file2 and PNG and JPEG is more obvious. We're showing that we can support multiple files, minimum of one file required, and that the extension can change depending on what's needed. And let's go ahead and add another version text is equal to, and image paste to 0.1 and hop back down. All right, so if r.to-lore invariant, let us print to the console await console.out. Okay, so this is, we didn't make this async yet, so can we, all right, static task of list of string, parse arguments, and let's go ahead and rename that to async. And why is this? Okay, that's odd. Console.out.write line async help text. What's going on? Did we define something wrong? Why are we having so much trouble here? No, that's closed, and that's closed. Okay, that's odd. Anyway, async and yes, usage text. And let's follow up that message with a brief description of what the application does. So write line async and paste an image from the system clipboard to one or more named files. That's going to be our description. We'll follow that up with a blank line. Obviously, we could have just tacked on a /n to the end of that one, but this will use the environment new line separator, so it doesn't matter. And here we're going to provide help supported arguments, and start with a tab, -h, minus help, let's leave some space, print this help information and exit. And now to document minus for version, which we're going to implement /t, -v. Actually, I'll show you guys a little trick. This is the one time in my life that I ever use the insert overwrite key on the keyboard. So insert and version. And here, print version information and exit. Okay, we can bring these in a little. Okay, and we could leave the, so after this is done, we want to exit, obviously, because they called minus minus help. We could pass some sort of flag back to main and have main exit, but we're going to need to distinguish between when no arguments were provided and when arguments without file names were provided. So we're just going to, like we said, this whole argument parsing situation is really just to avoid adding a dependency on a argument parsing library and keep things as bare bones and simple as possible. So we're just going to environment.exit from right here with exit code 0. And that'll save us from needing to persist a state and to add a flag and then check it later to see whether or not we should return with exit code 0 in case of no arguments but a command line, in case of a command line switch but no file names, versus a different exit code, for example, -1, if we ended up printing the help message but only because no arguments were passed. Anyway, so same story here, is equal to minus minus virgin, or arg is equal to, and by convention we'll use a capital V instead of a lowercase v. Lowercase v is usually reserved for verbose or debug modes, extended output and whatnot. And here, just await console.out.writeline async. And we use the .out here because the console class does not expose the async function. We have to use the out or error in order to get that one. And so we'll come here and we'll type in version text, which we defined above, and environment.exit 0. We put the help text up on top and the version text, but not anything else for a reason. The usage text is up on top so that the first time somebody opens program.cs, they'll see it right there in their face. No question about how the code is supposed to work or what it's supposed to accept. And the version text, because we might be coming back here to increment the version number a few times, so we don't have to come all the way down here and dig down through it. Otherwise, the usage checks will also be repeated when a invalid command is passed in. We'll see that right now. But this text here, there's really no need to refactor it out and put it in a variable and stick it up on top. So we'll just leave everything locally defined. Now, I know we already exited, but it just makes this make more sense. Here, else await console.out.writeline async invalid or unknown argument. And then we'll print the usage text, like I mentioned, async usage text. We'll follow that up with a helpful message or hint. See image paste minus minus help for further assistance, or for more usage information. And in this case, of course, it's going to be environment.exit -1. All right, so now if the argument didn't start with a literal dash, this is going to be, we expect it to be a file name. So we're going to come here and outputs.add arg, and that should do the trick. And now if no arguments were passed in, if outputs.count is equal to 0, so if we hadn't used the environment.exit here, we'd have to check if a literal -help or -virgin was passed in so that we don't exit with an error when the user didn't pass any file names. But now that we did use environment.exit above, we don't need to do that. We can just no files provided and await console.error.writeline async usage text followed by environment.exit -1. And after that, return outputs. And that's our argument parsing. We can get rid of this now and replace all that with bar outputs should equal to await parse arguments async, and we're going to pass in the args. Okay, and here instead of for destination in args, we're just going to pass in outputs imgpaste.save as destination. Okay, so that should do the trick there. Build, and we'll test it in a second. Okay. Alrighty. And I think I know why we were getting those errors from when we tried to use fish to interface with get here, and we can just /config, and yep, there it is. The work tree here is a little, we don't need the work tree definition at all. If we come here and then we go get status, there we go. All right. There are the changes that we made. Let's try it out. imgpaste /bin debug imgpaste.exe, enter, and there you go, the usage information, -- help. We can verify the output was 0 versus before without any parameters. It was -1 or 255 once it wraps around as an unsigned short. And the -- virgin text, there we go. All right, let's add -u. Okay, commit. Add -- help and -- virgin flags. Okay. Let's make that a little nicer. Also refactor argument parsing and path extraction function. Okay. One more thing and then we're all done. Let's copy a license over. I like to license my projects under the MIT public license. It's a liberal, clear, no ifs and buts license that makes it very clear that the intention is to share the code for all purposes for everybody everywhere. It's not a viral license like the GPL. It's developer and user friendly instead of the other options that tend to lean one way or the other. So CP, and there we go. This is my standard. You can see license. It's just a standard text with a copyright line. Let's get license, commit, and MIT license. Okay, and that is that. We have a application. It's a single binary imgpaste.exe. It is a .NET framework legacy or full-blown target supporting only Windows. We started off with a .NET only approach, trying to use the Clipboard class from system.windows.forms, and found out that there's a bug, at least something to do with this configuration running Windows 10, the pre-release version of the skip-ahead build for the build after fall creators update, wherein the clipboard always returns null. There is no data on the clipboard, and we're not able to use the SWF clipboard class. So we jumped to C++ in order to test out our assumptions that the clipboard is indeed valid and that it is a bug in the SWF clipboard class. And then we used the C functions from user32.dll wrapped in PInvoke from C# to interact with the system clipboard. We check for a valid bitmap image and export a handle to that. In Win32 C parlance, it's a h-bitmap, a handle to a bitmap structure, which is basically just a bitmap in the memory. Fortunately, we can use the system.drawing namespace available only on the full-blown .NET framework and not on .NET Core, but that's what we're using anyway, to go from the h-bitmap handle, or the bitmap handle, to a system.drawing.image representation directly without needing to manually read the bitmap headers and write out the file ourselves. And then we use that functionality to save it to the disk. We created a map with different file extensions to support different encoding formats. Fortunately, again, the image class in system.drawing natively supports all of these as output formats. And our code now, or our program, takes a file name from the command line, one or more file names, I should say, and takes an image from the clipboard, if any, and writes it out to the destinations the user selected. It plays nicely. It doesn't include the kitchen sink, and it plays nicely with other workflows, letting you easily export your images to one or more formats from the clipboard with just a single command line execution. You can then take the outputs and plug them into ImageMagick or upload them directly to wherever you need them. It's a no-frills application that will hopefully just come in handy over the years and eliminate a lot of the tedious copy and paste, launch MS Paint, resize the screen to the smallest size so that when you paste an image, the canvas isn't bigger than the image, and then save, convert to a different format if necessary, yada, yada, yada. And that is it. I don't know if I'll be revisiting this code. It's, it gets the job done. It's clean. We refactored the Win32 Clipboard access to its own class where, it's iDisposable. So we just open it. It exposes some of the constants that are defined in the C header files from the Windows code, so that we can query the clipboard for whatever format we need, and it returns a handle. We use that. Our imgpaste class itself is also disposable, so that we can close the image in question when we're done with it. Oh, that actually reminds me. After we never actually, after we added the iDisposable interface to imgpaste, we never changed our code in program.cs to use that, so we should wrap this all in a using statement. There we go. That's better. Let's add that to the get dev. Okay. Okay. And we dispose of the image when we're done. We only open the image once, and then we write it out multiple times. So we are saving needless access to the clipboard, communication with the kernel and whatnot, and also not needing to read things into memory multiple times. So it's pretty efficient and effective. We said the system.drawing.image namespace isn't exactly the most efficient when it comes to encoding files, but it'll definitely do the trick. And that's it for now. The code is being pushed to GitHub. You can access it online at github.com/neosmart/imagepaste. And I'll probably add a short README with a link to this video and other information. I'll be publishing the binaries online as well. They'll be accessible from that page for anybody wanting just to jump to just a copy of the code, for the copy of the executable for themselves. And probably be sharing a write-up on our blog at neosmart.net/blog, where we can shortly share the experience that we had, maybe talk about the bug we ran into with the clipboard class from system.windows.forms. And that's a wrap. This was my first time hosting a coding stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was definitely more interesting than I had imagined. We started off with what was going to be just a straightforward console application in .NET, and we ended up needing to dig all the way down and interface with the Win32 API directly in order to access the clipboard data due to a bug in system.windows.forms. And it was a fun adventure. Any feedback, comments, suggestions, please leave a comment, send us an email. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at facebook.com/neosmart and at neosmart on Twitter, and let us know what you think. Thank you, and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.